kind of had this memory of something where I was kind of picking up on patterns and over the years recognizing different suggestions that I would see within patterns online. And maybe even just deep down picking up on patterns of the way people were talking about things and whatnot. Anyway, if you've followed my stuff over the years, you know that during different seasons of my life, a huge aspect of the way that I would start thinking about stuff and have certain types of revelations or inclinations was through dreams, right? And I shared in the past, I think I deleted a lot of my recordings that I had shared about several of these sequences of dreams that I had when I was younger in my 20s, which had a huge influence on, among other things, directing me into doing a lot of this research and interrupting my life. And they were just very moving, jarring dreams. Maybe I shouldn't have deleted them, but I go through seasons where I'll put stuff out there and then I try not to be about all of this stuff, and it's difficult for people to confront or consider, I think, because there's so many different angles of this whole thing. And I think people just want something that fits kind of in the everyday conversation. It's hard to follow some of this stuff because I not only talk about political stuff or the questionable things that I had seen, but it gets associated within like religion, and not only religion on a surface level of the trade of ideas, but literal seemingly spiritual things happening, right? Anyway, though, I'm just reminded now as I'm trying to review some other stuff, and there's topics I need to kind of get ahead of and sort out and ranting about, and so I need to clarify and whatnot. And so I do feel like I need to do a little bit of mop up there, at least directing it in the right way. But in the midst of it, I'm kind of reminded of stuff, and I'm remembering this certain stage of things because I had now just recently outed this whole thing with the social media and different ones infiltrating these likenesses and using it to sow strife between various ones in my life and whatnot, and utilize it as basically formulating it into a way where any type of way that I would try to get out of the system framework, they would take it out on my loved ones or other ones in these false frameworks. And it functionally worked because of the massive disinformation. And so I talked about that, but then I was just in between watching other stuff and not thinking about it. And out of the blue, I just have this remembrance of this experience where I start picking up on societal cues of people seeming to have this approach where they're thinking they're fighting a battle for me, but then they're pinning it against other ones that I love. And functionally, I kind of gauge it, and I think they're confused, right? They're confused about the emphasis. There must be some cherry picking to make it seem like I'm against various ones. And so it's this false framing of things, again, through these mechanisms. So I'm picking up on these weird patterns of people. And then, so now I'm just reminded of something where I think what's difficult is that certain forces would literally seem to plant seeds to cause reactions among various groups, and then kind of selectively point to it to villainize people, and then to create these sides. And it would kind of work because it would seem like kind of like those dramatizations that you see on TV, like messed up reality shows where they sow strife so that they can divide groups and then create teams. It kind of seemed like that, but functionally from a improper exposure, improper exploitative measures, suggesting certain forms of like infiltrating people's lives, and then the feedback loop would be corrupt version of it to deflect into these like wrong areas of emphasis. Anyway, I remember over the years picking up on this, and even though there were legitimate areas where there were tensions that were developed, for me, I would always pan out and say, but that's not what this is about. And so anyway, so I was reminded of that, and I was reminded of various, how like when memories surface and then you're like reliving the emotions, and then I think I'm like unearthing more because I'm coming out and saying stuff. I'd remember this other occurrence, and I remember feeling frustrated about it, about all these manipulative forces built around everything. and how they had used certain ones close to my life and set them up within very complicated situations and then utilize it to sow more strife and then pretend to side with me or side with the others, or just, these weird contentions that they started to develop. I'd pick up on people that would seem to be playing out these certain sides, and it was just bizarre to me because it just was not the proper framework of things at all, and it was functionally allowing those corrupting everything to still functionally do that and misguide the public or what have you. Anyway, though, it reminds me, though, of several years prior to this, right? So I'd had these dreams that kind of led me into doing my own research and studying stuff. So this whole social media thing didn't pop off until the end of 2011. The end of 2011 and then up until now. And a lot of things culminated during the time of COVID with celebrities and whatnot. Prior to that, though, I had dreams and stuff leading up to it that really helped redirect my life. Other people in my life at that time can contest to that. And because I initially wasn't getting into all of this other in-depth stuff, I was just kind of questioning also on the surface level of just life and trying to figure things out the best I could. I didn't have like major deep opinions about things on the international stage. I was just trying to do stuff on the home front in my community, what have you. Anyway, as I got involved in this whole thing online, once in a while I'd have dreams and like kind of inclinations and stuff, but eventually, prior to it kind of really getting entrenched in this other level of stuff that started to be unearthed with this whole entertainment industry and stuff like that, I remember having this very disturbing dream, and I don't want to tell the dream. I'll kind of give what it seemed like, because I just don't want to involve the person, and the dream is also disturbing. But I had this dream and it functioned to give me this awareness of stuff. And I had already at that time started to sense that I was on a battle against false perceptions. I had started to feel like in the stage of negotiations on social media, it had started to kind of trip over this like other industry that seemed to start to be involved in stuff going on and monitoring us, that seemed to have something to do with like the sex industry and stuff like that. I say that because prior to at this point when things happened, I was picking up on all this questionable stuff, right? This weird energy, weird interactions, strange behavior, strange people that would in years prior make certain suggestions. There were these people that met us ran into us at the airport when I was traveling with my kids, and I had sensed that they were a part of some other connection that seemed kind of questionable. It kind of creeped me out a bit. They were kind of making sexual innuendo and making reference to someone that they knew. A variety of other things, and when I'd go to places, just so many different things that were giving me this inclination that, okay, this has reached another strange stage where the sex industry and people in some types of industries kind of are aware of some stuff going on. I then would start to try to monitor stuff online to the best that I could, but I was up against some major forces, and so I started to feel like there were certain ways that sex industry stuff was like trying to infiltrate my kids' life and their activity online and other stuff and others in our network, and try to kind of plant seeds to influence some of these behaviors and create these certain caricatures and stuff. So I tried to monitor that, but it was difficult that I was like just shooting in all different directions and still trying to keep the pace. And there was this whole industry and these characters that were seeming to kind of infiltrate these storylines. And so it was a whole other level of the beast, right? So anyway, I was on guard about that. And I previously, in years prior, strangely had this weird dream about getting caught up in this whole system and being kind of caught up in this like weird industry where, because at this time I couldn't even fathom, I didn't even think to fathom the system tied to all these like industry stuff that we're seeing now at the level that it's coming out. I mean, we'd all assumed as we watch movies and other stuff, like there's other strange things going on, but the measure by which things and stories were starting to come out was not even in the psyche, right? It was just like, I don't know, just literally just trying to do like small town stuff, right? So as I get more and more involved in this whole systemic work, it's this whole layer of stuff. So anyway, my point here is the whole sex industry stuff seemed to be this new wave of like dealing with the system and its infiltration, this whole animation, and it was palpable to me. So I was on guard of it, trying to be. And anyway, in the midst of that, it had been several years since I was trying to be like cautious about it. I didn't know until years later, like some questionable stuff had reached my kids' devices, some stuff sent to them, or this, that, and the other, weird stuff happening, stuff like just, we're finding out now, people coming out with stories where kids are targeted, certain things are, you know, put into like software or, you know, whatever. There was a lot of seeming like grooming going on and trying to, you know, whatever. So anyway, in this context, as I was like kind of battling this online stuff, and once in a while going to places and seeing certain people around and like this strange, like writing this story around our lives or something, almost like just waiting for me to take the deal and be absorbed into this other industry and how they monitor activists and yeah, whatever. And eventually then it starts growing among the entertainment industry. And even though it seemed like different ones online were signaling support, they were still caught up in the industry and stuff like that. Anyway, long story short, so I don't be rambling. I end up having this dream. And I don't know that I want to tell the dream. So I had shared before how when I wasn't really keeping my guard against the Kardashians and stuff and realizing how massive their connection and like potentially some of the maneuvers of like systemic reform and investments and stuff like that, I'd had this warning in my spirit, like really confrontational, to be on guard against like the Kardashians. And at the time, like it was like Kim Kardashian seeming fixated on stuff. Because at first it seemed like kind of nice, like they were just trying to help me. It seemed like they were trying to mirror support for what I, you know, and so I just didn't have my guard up. I wasn't watching them enough. I actually at one point in time thought they were actually helpful, you know. And in retrospect, I guess that's kind of like their mechanism, is they're packaged to the industry as helping people to like save them from the industry, but then they get like infiltrated in it and whatever. And so I had this like rise up in my spirit of like, no. And I literally had this like message kind of like of like Babylon and stuff, which is kind of weird. I know that's kind of weird to say, but at the time it was because I was doing research and I was doing like, I don't want to get too much into, so that was like a symbol to me that I was aware of. So that word, that type of word was kind of like saying this is opposed to your systemic work, because Babylon is like kind of like a phrase that's in reference to a corrupt system, and I was doing systems work. So it was kind of weird, and I, you know, you could say, was that in my spirit, or like was that like a God warning? Was that my like subconscious putting the pieces together and saying you're just afraid and you're vulnerable to taking the bait, and part of me saying no, don't. Either way, it was palpable, I remember. And even to the point where it caught me off guard, where I was like, wait, what? Like, they can't be that bad. Because I really was probably vulnerable at the time to just like not keeping an eye on them or knowing enough to do so. And so then later, years later, I start seeing this stuff developing in the industry and different kind of signals and stuff. And at the time, I'm not really realizing, Kylie Jenner was like another mini version of Kim Kardashian, even to the point where later, that's what Kanye said. I think he had said something like Kim gave birth to Kylie Kardashian. Like Kylie Kardashian was like an imagery in the same animation, a mechanism of like Kim Kardashian. Like they kind of function similarly. At that time, I didn't even think she was that problematic. I was just, they were kind of in the backdrop of stuff. I didn't realize this force that was developing. And I didn't know it was in the works so like if you follow stuff, at the time it seemed like different musicians were kind of following along. And anyway, long story short, they get involved in this whole like infiltration of stuff, and it seems like they're starting to formulate this approach to me. And they create this likeness of Kim fixated on me, and then Kylie Jenner seems to start curating this imagery to like infiltrate a likeness to one of my kids. And at the time I noticed, because she's like kind of getting older, she's a teen, that people are trying to like really sexualize her and sell this whole storyline. I'm kind of aware of it, so I am trying to be protective, but there's other forces, and so we kind of have this contention where they don't understand what's going on. There's usefulness in sowing division. That's why I call them like the pimping approach, where they use maneuvers to create contention so that the loved ones doubt that their loved one is trying to protect them, and they're sold these stories of all of these other like maneuvers to try to groom them. And so I'm kind of seeing these things happen, right? And I get this warning where at this point there's certain forces then that start to feel like I'm betraying the movement in the way that they're trying to. So up until this point, so this is kind of where there's like a little bit of a turning point. I'm trying to stay with like systemic reform and help advocate for various ones, but they're very much also entrenched in, like, various ones trying to advocate for reform are very much entrenched in the industry. And so it kind of takes a turn where it seems like they start to feel like I'm not like they're, I think at some point this is when like it seems like Israel and Netanyahu and different ones start siding with different ones and trying to get them to get me to comply. And so it starts to become this thing where I'm like kind of forced into like complying with them. And so then I decide no. And then I message the person and I say, no, like I can tell what you're doing. You need to kind of check yourself. And I'm not going to be absorbed into whatever that mechanism is. Like if anything, you need to like further correct your, measures for systemic reform, So it becomes this thing where it was kind of like a maneuver for merging potentials for things. And then it turns into, it seemed like their temptation to make a deal with these people. They start seeming to side with potentially absorbing this person into their movement because they start to signal that they're going to help him battle these other sides. So there's these improper sides that give this in for the Kardashian Jenners to like infiltrate this stuff. Seemingly, it seems like. And it seems like at this time they don't care that, like they're not looking for the quality of like the system reform. They're just trying to like control the, It's time there's like this mass following of people that are connected and involved with them, like with the Jenner, like, different ones in the industry. Since then it's changed, but at this time it was another building battle. Eventually though, the guys like straighten up and like, realize like I'm not trying to play them. They're used to being played, they're used to being effed with, they're used to people lying to them, and they realize in the long run like this is legit, like we're doing this shift, this breakthrough. But it seemed like it came up against one of the obstructions that they always run into, these forces, right? So since then we've had a breakthrough, but at this point in time it was building up into this thing. And I remember this thing kind of rise up in my spirit where I felt something was happening. I wasn't watching it because I was spending a lot of time working on this other stuff, and I could feel it, but I wasn't giving it enough attention. So I have this abrupt dream, right? So I have this dream. Let's see, how can I say it like without saying it? So I'm not really going to tell the dream. I'll just kind of tell kind of. It basically gives this imagery of this person. So it's never really me, and it's never really like the people. It's certain ones that represent various ones in the dream that I feel like I'm getting this awareness in my dream that people are going to start infiltrating different sides of people around me to try to bleed those around me to use them against me. And so I have this dream where let's see, it's been a while. It kind of starts where I'm in this room so I'm in my house, and I'm in this room, and there's this other person that seems to be maybe represent me, but kind of not. And it's this black woman, and I could tell like she's a celebrity, but it almost seems like there's this imagery of kind of like me, but not really me. And so it kind of seems like she's going to try to defend me or kind of support me to some degree. And then there's this horrific thing that happens. I forget the full vibe of it. I don't remember if I feel like I'm feeling this strife, like this tension. And I'm feeling this strife like in our house against someone else that's there. This division that's being sowed between us. And then I go out and I'm horrified because I'm shocked because I see that this person is being abused. They're being abused, and it's this horrific display of stuff. And then I just feel like I'm feeling really bad and horrified and like shocked and just grotesque. Like just there's so many different ranges of this, right? And then I'm angered and I'm just in shock, and this person that like, you know, this contention then is like being this like mode of like being abused and whatnot. And then I go outside, and then there's this other character. See, I'm trying to say this in code because it's just sometimes my dreams, like there's so many layers to it where it's a little bit of my personal life, but then it's overlaid with this other stuff, and then it's this warning of these other imageries and things. And there's this other person that represents some other portion of connection, and it doesn't seem like them. It looks like them, but it doesn't feel like them. And some other characters like infiltrating their likeness, and they have just this look, and they're just, I could feel this palpable anger and this rage and whatnot. And it's just kind of weird to me at first, but it just is like this inflamed anger, not only towards me but this other person and whatnot. There's other imagery and other things, but basically when I wake up I realize I get this feeling from it that there's these certain forces, because there's other reasons why I start to think this, like symbolism in the dream. I get this warning or this sense of this feeling that certain ones are like, they're used to playing dirty, and they're used to playing these games, and there's these measures of a type of approach of attack that is kind of developing toward me, where those in the industry are going to try to break me down by going after and creating this caricature through this other person, through someone associated with me. And that I also need to recognize that it's another form of abuse. It's abuse, and don't let it, like, they're gonna, like, it's either in my psyche that I already saw this pattern, which I think is highly likely, but it also pointed towards something that I had not known yet that did come out in the media, the entertainment industry did do. And so if you know the entertainment industry, they sow seeds of contention, they play mind games with you. They utilize a lot of like grotesque psychological torture towards other people and references and recruitments and whatnot. So I knew it was already happening, but there's been something in the works that they were planning to do in the industry. And I feel like what I was recognizing though from it was that those that started on it thought they were helping. And so the imagery that I get of the person that is kind of in connection to me, they think that they're helping me. But this other person that they also think is helping me is kind of like a plant. And they're going to use her. The industry is using this person, which kind of is this caricature of Kylie Jenner, that they're going to plant her in there under the guise that she's helping the situation, but she's using it because she's used to the Kardashian interaction of stuff. They're using it to actually abuse somebody in my life. Like the actual practice of it is abuse, targeting abuse and surveillance and other things. And they're trying to utilize the tactics of the sex industry to sexualize attention and revert the framework of this story now that they've attached the industry to it to be about sexualizing and grooming various ones in my network. And I was warned in my spirit that it's a form of abuse, but then also some in the industry, they're being sold the story that they're helping, which later turns out to be the case. The Kardashians try to infiltrate it by helping, and there's a form of violation and abuse, and they try to use the sex industry to undermine my systemic work to make it about sexualizing and selling and grooming various ones around me. Then I noticed that the person, they're going to connect these other caricatures through the industry so that they can undermine these other connections by selling this story to produce contention against me, by also redirecting the way that men are battling toward me, by connecting to men that might be hostile towards me or use their position to be hostile towards me. And so they're leading this industry front in the entertainment industry because that's the type of battles that they're used to. So I get this warning in my spirit through this dream, right? And I start to see it happen over the course of the next few years. I see this like music video come out. It caricatures somebody. It kind of maligns them. Those in it though, later that person betrays them, and it gets into this whole like drama session. And then they do come out and try to battle them and defend what I was about. And then this other person that was supposed to try, that they were utilizing, thinking that they're helping, like that they're going to stay committed to them helping fight this other battle that they created this divide for. Eventually I message them and they correct it and they make corrective measures. But it was almost like they're possessed by that animation. And it was just another breakthrough of the false tendency for them to circle around to like corruption through the industry. And since then though, kind of getting through that breakthrough, there was this other episode that happened where I just felt like I just kept being like I had this responsibility to kind of keep the pace, because every time something would happen and be formed against me, I would get this in my spirit of like, nope, be on guard. There's another thing happening. And I didn't choose this battle. I didn't want to do this. And then I would have to like say the thing and reach out and say the thing, and then we would go forward. And it was just like breakthrough after breakthrough. And then it would start happening. People that followed my stuff in the past, I shared this with them. They know this. These old, whether it be the old audio or whatever, I shared that I had this dream, and then it came out to be true. That they were formulating the industry to make these attacks, and they were utilizing them to groom various ones to create these caricatures so that they could try to turn my movement into another sex industry type industry battle and whatever. And they did end up trying to use other caricatures of other ones to use against me as well. they still try to use those other false caricatures to like battle against me as well, and people play to it. Then I just like have to keep going and keep going. I say this because they still tend to try to do that. They still try to infiltrate those storylines. And it was maybe about a year ago in the public, I saw somebody, or a couple times, like people were trying to take out stuff between, like I'd be with someone and they would be trying to choose different sides, as though I am on a different side of, you know, of various ones in my network. I don't see it like that. Those are false perceptions. Those are the way the industry try to go in and piece apart. That's why I still call it like the pimping approach. These women being used as like a pimping approach, because they go in, infiltrate, sow seeds of division between families. They use these networks so that they make them sellable and make people fight against different ones, so that you're against those that are actually trying to help you, so that you're sellable. And so that's why I keep saying, don't believe the ways that they're dividing the story. It's false. And it serves the corrupted industries all the way down. For those that do end up rising to the surface, that are trying to have reform and battle against corruption, they did come around. Some of them did come around and be like, and showed corrective measures, because for some reason they were being sold stories that I was playing them or I was against them. And so, yeah, since then they've, like those that actually were doing reform, like came around and were trying to make corrective measures. But, and then a lot of people that were trying to help me ended up having to go through the courts and get all this slander against them and whatnot. Other people would come out and then still be praising this, like Kylie Jenner, for just trying to help everybody, just trying to help. But she was like kind of planted right in there to target levels of abuse on people, to create levels of abuse on people, and to help manufacture redirecting this so that it wouldn't be about systemic reform. And anyway, just so many other things. And so this is what I mean when I say like of course there's things in my own life that are not perfect and we have to work through, but there's also been a lot of forces to create that abuse, to like dog whistle other people, to like divide things that are going on and refocus it on continual violation and exploiting the situation to start making people think they're remedying it, but they're actually involving themselves in the distraction that perpetuates the abusive cycle of things, so that it keeps going, so that it's deflecting, so that it makes these frameworks continue to be on these other situations where they don't really intend to let it be alleviated, because it's written in such a way where following the deflecting path doesn't bring resolve. It helps them to keep doing what they're doing. I was just thinking about that, because when I start being reminded of all, like, it reminds me why I am also continuing in this fight, how I didn't want to bring up all this stuff, but it's abusive, and this is why I say it's abusive, and they keep doing it, and they do it on purpose. They use a lot of measures and corruption to keep it going. And it's just another example where it'd probably make more sense if I gave more of the details, but I just don't want to. And it kind of like grosses me out because of some of the imagery and some of the stuff. But it did enter into other people when they were starting to come out and saying, yes, we agree. Like the industry does this stuff, and they utilize, there's a lot of these measures and animations and intentions behind these measures of, these caricatures that they create, and they're sent out to go and recruit other people to run through and destroy their lives and have them to be a part of it as well. And so I'm just kind of giving an example, another reason of things that I had seen play out and why it's also like deeply meaningful to me. I think my main appeal too is like for the public, don't fall for that false referencing, to think you're like projecting this on those close in the community and whatnot, because we're not the ones doing it. They want you to think that we're the enemy, or to split us, to, have to choose between different ones. And none of that serves anything except to get you involved in the perpetual abuse and to deflect from the powers that are actually doing this to people on purpose. and it's a game to them. They literally are playing with people's lives and abusing the system, and it's a type of lawlessness, and it's grotesque, and it's part of this really grotesque industry that pieces people apart and tries to sell them to these other maneuvers. And anyway, it's just another example of what I'm talking about.